and welcome to today's live stream. My name is Deborah and I self-publish bilingual kids picture books as well as adult epic fantasy under my pen name Delilah Wan. With me today are some of my wonderful fellow self-published fantasy blog authors. We have Tim, we have Mary, and we also have Steve, who is coming. He's just running a tad late, so we may get him to just introduce himself as he is able to come on. But for now, I'd like to ask my wonderful panelists to just introduce themselves, and if we wouldn't mind just going around in a circle on the screen. Would you like to start us off, Tim?
Yeah, sure. I'm Tim Hardie. I'm a UK-based fantasy author. I was the SPFBO 7 finalist back in 2021, and I also entered a SPFBO 9, which where I got to meet these guys the first time, which was really nice. So I entered my novel Hall of Bones, which was the finalist entry back then, and that's the book we'll be talking about a bit later on this show.
Well, I'm MT Zimny, or you can call me Mary, and I was also in the SPFBO 9, proud SPFBO 9 loser for my book Beta. It's a YA superhero fantasy. I think it's fun. I ran a Kickstarter for the audiobook back over the holiday season, and it was successful in the final hours. And now I am self-funding the sequels audiobook.
That is awesome. Thank you so much for being here today with me, guys. Welcome to the channel. So we're going to start with some high-level questions on the whys and the expectations that you should have going into audiobook production and a Kickstarter campaign. And then we're going to dive into each phase of the campaign, and there's quite a lot of them. And then what we'll do is we'll open up for general questions before wrapping up at the end. And during this stream, we are going to be taking questions and running polls and things like that. There is a lot going on the back end. So if you do have questions, please submit them through the Slido app, which we're using today for today's stream. It's really easy. You can either scan the QR code or just use the pin that's on the screen to jump in and put your questions. And you can also vote on the poll that we've got going right now, which is to give us a sense of how familiar you are with Kickstarter as a crowdfunding platform. So make sure to give the poll a shot. I can see that some people have answered already with we've been a backer, but we have never actually run any campaigns so far. So I'm hopeful that today's session is going to be super valuable to everybody. All right, without further ado, let's get into the questions. And I am going to start with MT here.
All right.
Why did you decide to self-produce an audiobook instead of partnering with a company like Podium or Tranter?
I just wanted to be sure that I had total control over it, which is, also why I did self-publishing. And I figured that there's so many avenues to just cutting out the middleman and hiring an audiobook producer yourself, because the audiobook producer does all the work. And then I used ACX, and I chose wide distribution, which means I retain all the rights. And you do get less money per audio. Hi, cat. You get less money per audio, Audible credit used or whatever, but I get to do whatever I want with it, which I think is pretty neat.
What about you, Tim?
Yeah, similar kind of thinking, really. I guess it is that control thing, indie for a reason, really, in many respects, is that you do get to make that choice. I think for me, the biggest fear was, producing an audiobook is quite an expensive process. It's quite a high upfront cost. So I think that the chances of that series not progressing with somebody like Podium or Tranter is obviously higher if that book doesn't sort of become an immediate success. So you haven't then got the option to release those sequels in quite the same way. So for me, I was very keen to sort of, again, run it the way I wanted, and have those choices further down the line as well, really.
That is absolutely my biggest fear with that. I've just started looking into producing my audiobook, and the starting number, the headline number of this is how much it's going to cost when you pay for it outright. It's a lot of digits. So what made you decide to actually go with a professional narrator instead of doing something like an auto-narrated audiobook or recording and narrating your audiobook yourself?
Yeah, so I actually considered first narrating it myself. I have a background in theater. I went as far as buying a really nice microphone. I had a whole setup in my walk-in closet. I mean, I was soundproofing it and everything. But I have a 14-month-old baby. You can only do so much during nap time. It got to the point where I was like, this isn't feasible, just because of where I am in life. And I still wanted that audiobook sooner than later, so I figured that the price tag is worth it for a good audiobook, and I stand by that now with my finished product.
What about you, Tim?
I can't imagine anything worse than somebody listening to me read my own book to them for what would probably be about 16 to 18 hours. Now, if you've got like a background in theatre and something, that may give you an option actually as to what, which way you want to go. And, life might be different later down the line, but I just do not have, I don't think, I can probably, well, I can read, obviously, I can read out loud, but that's not the same as actually doing narration, because narration is a performance, and narration's an art and a skill in itself. And you mentioned the AI sort of, synthetic voice option there for Delilah, and I think for me that's an absolute no-no. That the only reason for me why I do an audiobook is because I want that emotional connection with my readers in a different format, basically. And you simply don't get a performance. What you get is a reading with those, very sophisticated but ultimately artificial devices. You get a reading of your product. You don't get somebody who understands what they're reading, understands the scene and why, and can sort of translate that into their delivery. For me, that kind of left me with no other options other than professional narration, because that's really for me what this is all about. When you do an audiobook right and you get it professionally narrated, you're getting that performance, that understanding, and that I suppose richer experience than if you were simply reading it yourself, really.
That's an excellent point. I've noticed myself that there seems to be kind of two types of audiobook listeners, and there may be more, but the two general types I'm seeing are the people who are listening to audio because for whatever reason they want to read, but they physically cannot be sat in front of a book and have the text go into their eyes.
Yeah.
And then the other kind of audiobook reader are those who actually specifically seek out the narration because the narration is bringing the story to life in a way that they don't get if they're simply reading the prose. Now, the interesting question for me was you both have many books out in a series. And in fact, I think both of your series are actually complete. So why did you decide that now was the time for the audiobook and not earlier or not later, or why now?
I mean, there's a certain level of security in knowing that it's the completed series. I'm not going to get halfway through and totally burn out completely. And while indie publishing, you're doing everything. In the process, when I'm mid-series, I'm already drowning in so much work. And now it's like, I feel like I have my foot in the door. I am marketing a full series, which people are more receptive to than just like a single book or two books of a trilogy. It just felt like the correct next step. And it wasn't really something that I felt like I needed during the creation of the series.
Yeah, I'm that close to being finished. So mine's a 4-book trilogy, which just shows the journey I've been on to try and get the Brother of the Eagle done. But Broken Brotherhood, the 4th book, is basically in final editing now. So the book is written. And a bit like you just said, Mary, it sort of like had a bit more mental space to do it, apart from anything else. Just writing a series, particularly the latter books of a series, is quite hard because it's a very different thing to the expansive starting something new, as I've found out anyway. So there's space to it. And I just felt, in many respects, that the completed series, the next logical step is you look at your markets, you look at how to access new readers, and a completed series is more attractive from that point of view. So this was something I was always going to do. But now I now have the time, the energy, and frankly, the industry contacts as well. I mean, I think that, you can't just have anyone narrate your book. You do need to find the right narrator. And I was quite fortunate. Last year I worked in a different Kickstarter project where actually the stretch goal was the audiobook. The actual creation of it was an anthology that was producing effectively a physical product. Then we went an extra stage, and RJ Bailey, I might as well just show it because otherwise people don't know what I'm talking about. So it was the Anatomy of Fear, which was the horror fantasy anthology that came out through Kickstarter last year, and RJ Bailey did the recording for that. And so at that point I suddenly thought, I've actually found my narrator for my book, because I could see how his voice and his range of voices would fit with the type of story I was trying to tell, particularly because my story is a lot of speech based, so lots of speech interactions between lots of different characters. So again, you need a particular type of narrator that can actually modulate the voice and do those different performances to give the reader, I suppose, a different experience as to who, so they know who is talking fundamentally. It's quite quite important, that. So yeah, once I'd seen RJ's work or heard RJ's work in that previous project, I knew then I had a solid, skilled narrator I could actually then bank on to get my project done as well. So yeah, I suppose just lots of different things came together, and it just felt like I was in a position to do it, really, whereas I hadn't felt that in the past.
I really wonder if a lot of people these days feel the need to launch with all formats. I know I've been feeling that pressure as somebody who's debuted relatively later than you guys, because the bar for indie self-publishing has just grown so high that anybody who is putting out a debut these days, if they're doing all the right things with their cover, their blurb, and everything, you really can't tell if somebody is indie published or not, just by looking at the book and how it's marketed. And so for me, a lot of there's all this pressure, and I put out book one, and suddenly I'm getting a lot of readers asking me, I want to read your book, but I want to read it in audio. And I'm just like, oh, like I haven't hit my ROI on book one. So it's very, very difficult for me to sit here and go, all right, let me chuck another $6,000 or $9,000 into producing an audiobook right now. Which brings us to a really, really nice segue. We're going to talk about just how expensive it is to get a human-narrated audiobook to be produced. So for those who aren't familiar, the SAG-AFTRA, I hope I pronounced that correctly, which is the union for audiobook narrators, their minimum rates for narrators start at $250 per finished hour of audio. And finished audio means it's been edited, mastered, and it's basically upload ready. An hour of audio works out to roughly 9,300 to 10,000 words. And so your average fantasy novel of about 100,000 words is going to start at around $2,500 or $3,000 to produce, which I look at that and I'm like, my bank account does not like that. So I'm really curious about the second poll question for our panel. Did you start off thinking you were going to, crowdfund your audiobook, or did you actually look at some other funding options besides Kickstarter to begin with?
I make all my financial decisions in part with my husband, because that's what being a responsible team looks like. And we know that we have 3 really fat books on our hands, so we knew it would be expensive. And we looked at the funds. I also quit my job this year to be a stay-at-home mom, because childcare is insane. But together we decided that we at least had the money for one, but that I would try to crowdfund. And if it was successful, then I get 2 audiobooks. So we crowdfund the first one, and now, like I said, I'm self-funding the sequel. But other than that, I didn't really look into other options. I knew I had the money for one. I knew crowdfunding was a thing. I knew I was willing to give it a good Hardie try. And it worked out. Again, in the final hours, it was very stressful. I cannot understate enough, or overstate, I don't know, how stressful it is to run a Kickstarter that isn't immediately funded.
Seconded, by the way, just to add that.
So for those who don't know, Tim's campaign is actually live right now. It ends in, was it 4 or 5 days? I'm confused with the but
yeah, we're all over the time zones, which makes it even more confusing. So UK time, 10th of April at 1:28 p.m. is
that's very specific.
Drop dead cut-off point.
So how about you, Tim? Did you look at other funding options, or was Kickstarter kind of your main go-to?
Yeah, there's 2 parts to this, isn't there? I suppose there's the choice of the platform, isn't there? And then there's also hi there, Steve. And then there's also the funding of it. I think the whole point of indie publishing is it should be accessible, and everyone should be able to do it if they've got a writing talent and want to express themselves artistically in that way. And I think actually, what you mentioned before, July, about the pressure to potentially produce all formats all at once. It's great if you've got an audience that wants that and is hungry for it, but actually there's a realism factor here. For me, I very much set out to treat this as a business and say, from my point of view, I'm not going to spend more than I'm earning. So obviously at the beginning there was an outlay to get going and get started, but then each year of the business, I only put back in what I actually make out of writing and producing those books. So for me, I was never going to self-pay for that audiobook, because then my kids would say, well, Dad, I can't go to university now. And those kind of things would start to come into play. You know, you've got other responsibilities, haven't you? I think you need to be very clear about what you're prepared to spend, how much, and set a limit on that and stick to it, because otherwise this is, you know, it is a money pit if you're not careful. Why Kickstarter? I mean, there are other options, aren't there? And I think, you know, Indiegogo has been mentioned, but and I think BackerKit as well, as well as sort of coming into the fore. But I think one of the things is people are familiar with Kickstarter, and it is very much associated with creative arts publishing. There's a brand recognition. So for me, it was always my go-to. I'd worked behind the scenes on the Anatomy of Fear Kickstarter as well, so I did some of the fulfillment and some of the work with backers and stuff as well, and that's why I was familiar with it. But I think you mustn't underestimate as well, just backers being familiar with it also helps them back, because if it's something brand new, they don't necessarily know what to do. And you know, my parents, for example, don't even know what the internet is, so you know they can't really back these projects in the way that I think perhaps we can imagine younger people or, you know, internet-enabled people can do. So for me, I think it's got the brand recognition that within the indie and publishing community, which is really helpful. But also it's got that familiarity as well. So it just felt like the right choice, really, in terms of the vehicle, the mechanism for it. So those are my reasons.
That's a great response. Thank you so much. And we now have Steve with us here. Thank you so much for joining us, Steve. I might just get you to catch up and introduce yourselves to the live stream audience here. And all we've covered so far is just the high levels of why Kickstarter, why now, why audiobooks. So if you could follow up your introduction with your take on that, that would be wonderful.
I am Steve D. Wall. I am the author of The Way of Renegades, another one of the SPFBO 9 entrants, along with these other fine people. And I also ran a Kickstarter for The Way of Renegades in order to get my audiobook produced. Happy to be here also. Thank you for putting this together, Delilah.
Because you and I are actually in very different positions to Mary and to Tim, because they've both got completed or nearly completed series, whereas you and I are both, we entered SPFBO 9 with our debuts. And I was saying earlier that as a debut these days, I felt so much pressure to be launching with, you know, with all the formats. So I needed the ebook, I needed the paperback, I needed the hardcover, and the only thing I could not get done on my own dime was the audiobook. So what made you, as a debut author these days, go, you know what, I am actually going to launch with audio?
I did hear a little bit of the end of Tim's answer about Kickstarter and its size, its scope, and therefore its ability to reach people. And that was definitely the number one reason for me why I went with Kickstarter. But the reason for using it to make an audiobook, for me, I was always going for an audiobook. I love audiobooks. I think it's this almost perfect blend to create the best media possible to tell a story that has these kind of theatric elements into it and everything, without having to sacrifice stuff like you see often with adaptations in film. You know, film is great. Film adaptations are wonderful, but sometimes for the sake of it being a different art form, you lose a lot of things that you get in the writing, but you still have that when you do an audiobook. When I was deciding to publish, it was always going to be an audiobook. I didn't go hardback myself. Like you just mentioned that you got the hardback done. I'll sacrifice the hardback in order to get the audiobook done.
That's fascinating, because the one thing I do regret, right, and for anybody who is watching this and thinking of debuting and thinking that you do need a hardback, I regret this. I massively regret this, because this cost like, and when you because I was publishing on a shoestring budget, and so to do the jacket, you needed an extra cover design cost. So my cover design cost basically doubled once you had like all the extra fiddly stuff. And that meant instead of getting a lot of the nice distinguishing features that you get with jacketed hide covers, I don't have a separate cover underneath this jacket. It's just the same cover. And so in my view now, when I'm looking towards like, okay, what if I do want to run a Kickstarter? Doing the hardback at first was a big waste, because I could have launched then on Kickstarter and said, hey, I don't have a hardcover yet. Let's do a special Kickstarter hardcover, which based on the research I've done, it seems to be a lot easier to sell that. And we will get into, you know, doing an audiobook only Kickstarter versus, you know, audiobook as a stretch goal a little bit later on in this discussion. But for now, the other question I wanted to ask up front just about funding was, did you all think or intend for the Kickstarter to primarily raise 100% of your audiobook production costs, or was it just you kind of had that as a, well, it'd be really nice if that happened, but secretly I've got this other pile of savings here that whether or not the Kickstarter covers all my proceeds, I'm still going to get the audiobook?
I did make that my goal. I estimated my book would cost about $3,400, and after shipping and rewards, I made my goal $5,000, and I regret it, even though I made it. It was, like I said, stressful. I found myself wishing for all 30 days of that campaign. I was like, I should have set a smaller goal because this is just not attainable. And luckily, I had my real estate agent swoop in that final day, and I guess she was feeling generous. And without her, I would not have made the goal. And then I would have been out all of my funding. So when I tell people if they do Kickstarter, unless they're very, very sure in their fan base, don't go for 100% because it was a mistake.
What about you, Steve? How was your experience of getting to funding? Because I think you have the highest goal of anybody here. You were raising $9,000 US, if that's correct?
Yes. Yes. My narrator was expensive, but that was also well worth it, and part of it the entire time for me. We can talk more about that later. But I was pretty confident, actually, that I was going to reach it. I agree with what MT just said. Like, if you're not confident, it's probably not the best idea. But I was pretty confident just in my friends and family and the fan base that I had available. And so I was definitely looking at getting the majority of it. And honestly, without my mom, I probably wouldn't have made it. She was saying things to me like, I'm watching every day, and if it doesn't make it, then I'll just add in whatever the difference is. And I was like, no, don't do that. Yeah, I was fairly confident, and it turned out well. It turned out to be well founded.
That's excellent. Tim, how are you finding it? Because I know just trying to get over that finish line for the past week or two, because I think you're kind of in that slump, aren't you? You're in the slump, but you're trying to go into that final push to the end. How's that been?
Yeah, it is. The stress of it, I think, is not to be underestimated. And I think if you're thinking about doing this, do make sure you've got a support network of people that sort of, you can cry on their shoulders at different points, because that slump is very, very difficult to deal with. So, I think mine's doing the usual thing. First couple of days, bang, straight in, and it's 25% funded within hours, and that was great. But then you're just ticking along, watching that sort of like graph of doom, sort of like going upwards. But it's not going upwards to the line. You need it to trying to push it up. So I'm kind of just about to enter what I'm hoping is that final flurry that people talk about, where actually in those final days people do step forward. And I think a lot of this is about necessity. People, but 30 days is a long time for people to put stuff off, isn't it? And I think an awful lot of people have said they're quite happy to back, but they'll get round to it. Eventually, you've really got to get round to it, otherwise the project doesn't fund. And I think that often then that helps produce that sort of final cascade. So I'm about 61% funded at the moment, so still a fair way to go. Like I said, we're actually the lowest goal of anybody here, and that's 100% funding the project for the reasons I just mentioned. That I wasn't really, I have set that as my own sort of, I suppose, funding strategy, that I only spend what I've got, and I don't, that it doesn't generate that kind of income to sort of like close that gap. Even that's a compromise, because it's about doing the different royalty arrangements, per hour, per hour rates, which you mentioned before. There are other deals around, so you can, for example, go in with a bit of a royalty split combination with an hourly rate, for example, which is actually what that first goal really means. So at a higher goal, effectively my narrator gets paid more, but at the lower goal, my narrator gets a share in what the book ultimately makes as well. So it's still a good deal, but it's just a different type of deal. So that was my compromise. And yeah, I did set it a little bit lower, thinking wider family would come in and help with that, but but not much, because I really I put myself back in the position I was trying to avoid, which is actually funding it myself, which from doing that, I don't need all this, quite frankly. I'll take out a bank loan and do it that way.
Absolutely. So I think we've pretty comprehensively covered why Kickstarter. So let's get into talking about the expectations versus the reality. And all three of you have mentioned just how mentally tough it is to get through the campaign. And I think so far we've really just been talking about the campaign itself, once it's gone live and you're out there trying to rally up the potential backers and get the pledges. But what I kind of want to know is, like, everybody is familiar through being a backer of what it is like when the Kickstarter is live. But if you're thinking about the overall process of, going into this Kickstarter, or the lead up, the research, as well as besides the campaign being live, also all the post-campaign fulfillment stuff, what expectations did you have going in, and how has it compared to the reality so far?
I think I expected more people to be really excited about an audiobook Kickstarter. And I think part of that is like what you said earlier, Delilah, how, when you're marketing a book and you have all these readers like, oh, well, is it on audio? Like, I'll read it, it's on audio. And that gets in your head, you're like, these people would support a Kickstarter because I offered the audiobook as a reward for like $20, which is cheaper than it is on Audible. Of course, what I don't take into account there is people with Audible have their Audible credits, and they don't want to use the $20. They want to use their free credit every month. And so that was sort of the letdown. From what I've heard from other people, audiobook Kickstarters don't do as well as, like you said, like a hardback. I guess doesn't surprise me because it's like not a physical, tangible thing, which I guess is like where we get into rewards. But even my rewards, I think, just like weren't like enough to entice new readers. And then old readers are like, well, why would I need the audiobook? I've read your book. So that was sort of the conundrum I found myself in.
Did you find that, Steve and Tim, or are you guys finding that?
I think yeah, that's. I think if not a physical product is a difficult sell on Kickstarter, and I suppose why are people funding you? Why are people backing you? I suppose I approached it that I wanted to create something new out of the Kickstarter, partly for that very reason. So I actually produced. I'm going to be producing a short story ebook collection and also a short story ebook audiobook that's a throw-in, that's extra, that's new, for exactly the reason you just mentioned, Mary. People have already read it, so why would they do it? Why would they want it in audio form? Some people will want it twice because they want a different experience, won't they? But I want to make sure there's something new in that, in the melting pot that would try and entice people in. But I think at the end of the day, it's just easier, and frankly, the costs are lower if you're trying to sort of produce something like, say, a special hardback edition and things like that. They're just, I think the platform in that sense lends itself a bit more to it, and you're shooting quite a high cost, and people aren't getting that physical reward. So my sort of ebook package, is very similar to yours. I think mine's £25, because I've got to obviously pay the Kickstarter fees out of that. So you're paying more because you're having to cover Kickstarter's overheads as part of the commercials of that to then get through to the other side, and also cover some of the commercial risks that come with Kickstarter generally as well. So it's a difficult one, actually. Some people will be in it just for the product. That's fine. I look at it as a bit more, sometimes you just want someone to succeed. And I back projects, but I've not actually wanted the reward, to be perfectly honest. But I've still wanted them to succeed because they've gone to Kickstarter and put something out there that means a lot to them. So I often back stuff without even pledging to get the reward itself. And so I think people approach it for different reasons, really. But yeah, it's definitely audiobooks are definitely a harder sell. I don't think that's unless Stephen's obviously different. I think it's a harder thing to get across to people why they should back that.
Yeah, the expectation that I had going into it was in my research, Kickstarter is the biggest crowdfunding platform there is, and I learned that there are people who just hang out on Kickstarter, kind of like how people hang out on Facebook or what have you, and they just scroll through the different projects that are there, and oh, this looks cool, I'll fund that. Oh, that looks cool, I'll fund that. In learning about that, I was thinking, oh, that's fantastic. That's marketing that's going to happen without me having to lift a finger. And so I was thinking I was going to get more random people on Kickstarter that would come and get interested in and want to get a reward or something like that. But the main thing for Kickstarter's really, really big in the tech industry and in the game board industry, things that are tangible products, but they're also tangible products that are really based around visualization. We're like, look at this cool gadget that I made that does this cool thing, and you can have it too, and you can touch it too. And so like there's this driving force that's not really present in virtual rewards, and most of my rewards were virtual. I did offer a copy of the book as one of the rewards, but I was lucky to have the backing that I did, that I knew I was going to have going into it. Thought I was going to get more, that's probably a comment on me as a marketer as well, but that was definitely how it turned out.
That's fascinating. I think that's such a great insight, because looking at the origins of Kickstarter as a crowdfunding platform, it was originally for these big, massive projects where the creators couldn't get the funding through any other conventional means of corporate sponsorship or grants and things like that. So that is a really insightful way of looking at it. What I want to do is get into sort of the more detailed questions now. And so if we'll start by talking about, how did you guys find your narrators? Because when I went and looked at all of your campaigns, you guys had already picked all your narrators. And I'm guessing based on what Steve said, Steve, you picked the narrator and then you structured everything else around your narrator. Would that be a correct statement?
Absolutely, 100%. Yeah, my narrator is Stephen Pacey, and he is best widely known for his work narrating Joe Abercrombie's epic fantasy series, The Blade itself, or the First Law series, I should say. The Blade itself is book 1. And there you could just type in Stephen Pacey audiobook narrator into Google, and there are Reddit threads with people talking about like, oh, Stephen Pacey has ruined me for all other narrators. And so, that was a big part of my marketing strategy, was just name dropping Stephen Pacey. And so whatever it took to make it happen, I was willing to do it.
And how did you actually approach a narrator of Stephen Pacey's caliber, right? Like, did you just directly reach out to him? Did you have to go through an agency, or how did you actually approach him? And what sort of things surprised you about that process of trying to negotiate the arrangement with him?
Well, before I was looking through like Findaway, Voices, and these other platforms that are, supposedly budget-friendly options for indie authors like ourselves, and it got to the point where I was thinking to myself, man, if I'm going to spend this much money, I have to love the voice. I have to love this person's ability to tell my story. And I wasn't really falling in love with anybody that I found yet. And I was like, well, you know who I do love? And I found his agency, and I just emailed them directly. And I was like, hello, I'm sure that you would never work with little old me, but like, if you would actually, that would be really cool. And to my surprise, they were like, yeah, totally. I didn't actually communicate with him very much at all through the process. It wasn't until after the recording had happened that I was able to speak with him. I think because of his status and the agency that he worked with, there was very little negotiation for me to have to do, which in a way is a good thing, definitely. And so, I just had to meet the demands of his service, and it was definitely worth it.
What about you, Mary? Because I think you mentioned earlier you did actually go through the ACX process. How did you find that?
It was a lot of fun. I know people have like different like issues with ACX, and like Amazon's kind of big evil corporation who's scalping little guys. But running auditions was such a blast, and it was honestly like the stealing deal with like, am I going to do an audiobook? I got to pick like 3 short scenes that I uploaded. And then over the course of like 2 days, I got over 30 auditions. And they were so much fun to listen to. I ended up going with Elizabeth Phillips, who is so talented. And she was actually the person who submitted her audition first. And she had submitted it so fast that I was like, there's no way that's good. So I didn't listen to it until the end. So she submitted it first. I listened to her last, and as soon as she started talking, I was like, oh, that's my main character. And I showed my husband the audition, and he goes, okay, well, I guess we have to do this then. And I was like, yeah, because that's her. And I don't know how else to like describe it. Like, I was like taking notes on all these 29 other auditions, and then I get to the last one, and I was like, it's not even a contest. Like, it sucked because like I liked a lot of them. And like I said earlier, I have a background in theater, so I know it really hurts to not get the role you want. So I felt really sad. I was like, I wish you could all be Samantha. But I did pick Liz, and she's doing the sequel right now. And what's fun with her is like Steve, you said that you didn't get to like chat with him until after the whole process, really, but I get updates from her like daily. So I get like 1 to 3 chapters a day until she's done, and then I get to message her and just fangirl over how great she is every day. And that's kind of where I'm at currently with the sequel.
That sounds amazing. Now, Tim, you mentioned that you found your narrator because you had done the anatomy of fear with that particular narrator. Could you talk a little bit about how you found them for that project then? How did you actually negotiate the arrangements there?
Yeah, I mean, in some respects, it's a bit of a longer it was a longer process than what I sort of summarised there, because actually RJ's kind of obviously been in the sort of narration market for a good 7.5 years now, so he's done quite a lot of audiobooks. He's quite well known for doing indie fiction, although he does also do other kinds as well. And he'd done work for L.L. McRae, Iron Crown, and also H.L. Tinsley, We Men of Ash and Shadow. We did both of those SPFBO 7 finalist books. So H.L. Tinsley was kind of like the architect and the producer effectively for The Anatomy of Fear. So when she kind of pitched that project to me about coming on board and contributing a story, RJ was kind of in the wings with that working relationship, basically, as somebody who would be on board for the audiobook stretch goal. And to be perfectly honest with you, because RJ's kind of been involved in the SPFBO 7 crowd a little bit, he had approached me 2 years ago about doing Hall of Bones, and for all the reasons I talked about earlier, it just wasn't a runner for me, but we kept in contact. And then, yeah, I suppose I got to know him through doing some of the audio proofing work for The Anatomy of Fear. So I understand his process. Obviously, I proofed my own story, but also proofed quite a few of the other authors as well when we were getting through those audio pickups and things like that. So I knew we found we could work together. It's as simple as that, really. So that it's a very different arrangement to what you've just described there, Steve. Of I suppose going to the agency and they provide you with the performer. With RJ, it's a little bit more organic. So it just felt it's kind of become part of my promotional team on the audiobook now as well. So we've done quite a few podcasts together, live recordings, things like that. So yeah, I suppose it's just a growing working relationship where it just feels like he would be a really good fit, to actually bring that audiobook version to life effectively. So it's it just felt like I didn't really feel I needed to audition anybody else because I knew he'd do it. A bit like you just said, Mary, where the person at the end, bang. I just had that moment sort of organically happening over the last couple of years, really. So yeah, it's a very different journey.
That's amazing. I really love what you said there about considering the narrator part of your actual team in getting that story out there. And so let me segue to the next area that nobody wants to talk about because I hate legal stuff, but legal stuff is important, and so we should probably cover this to some extent. Now, Steve, you mentioned that you went through an agency, and so I assume that they kind of have like a very standard process for handling that. And Mary, you went through ACX, which is sort of, they also have a very standard process for doing that. What are some of the key terms and things that you need to be aware of when you're going through those processes?
I think just like knowing the difference between the types of deal. I know Tim talked about like his lower goal is for a profit share. And so knowing the difference between profit share and like full royalties. And then with ACX especially, if you do profit share, you have to be, what is the opposite of wide? Like ACX owns your stuff. You get more money.
Exclusive.
Exclusive. I'm an author. I know words. I don't. I'm a scammer. So I want it to be wide. My plan is to get all of my audiobooks into libraries. Which, like, if it's exclusive through ACX, like, I'm not gonna be able to do that. So just like knowing that, like, yes, you'll like get less money per sale, but like you own it and you get to put it wherever you want. And then that was also like important to me with my Kickstarter, because I don't know the legalities behind like BookFunnel. And offering my audiobook as a reward for the Kickstarter through BookFunnel. Like, I wasn't sure if I was exclusive through ACX, am I allowed to do that? And I was like, instead of like risking it and trying to figure out that, I'm just going to err on the side of I own it all. Mm-hmm. So I think that's like the major lingo.
Gee, you're exclusive to Audible, is that correct? Did I get that right?
Yes.
Yeah. So how did all of that work? Because you found your narrator through an agency, and so you were outside of the ACX system, but then you've gone in and you've actually published it exclusive to Audible. Can you talk a little bit about how all of that works, and especially on the legal side of things? I
own my audio manuscript because I made it and produced it outside of that. There's definitely going to be more upfront costs with doing it that way, but then the benefit is I can go and, different from how Mary just said, I am exclusive to Audible and to Amazon, but I do own the manuscript. So if I wanted to, I could pull it out because I didn't make it through them and they're not really part of it. They're just a distributor for me. I found it to be really important that I could do that if I wanted to. As far as with the narrator, royalty shares and everything, I like I said, I didn't have to do any negotiation there. But also a big part of it, why I didn't even feel the need to, was because I didn't have to worry about royalty shares or anything like that. It was just flat rate for the time spent working, and then I got a finished product, and I could do what I wanted with that finished product. And I just decided to go Audible exclusive for ease of mind and ease of business, basically. I felt like it was a little bit better to just focus on one platform for me anyways, because I like to keep things simple. I don't want to like overburden myself in any way. I definitely agree that like you need to know the differences between what you will be getting into with royalty share, or who actually owns the manuscript, when or if it can be taken off of a platform or anything like that, and so forth. It was all pretty simplified for me. I remember even the contract that I got, it wasn't like this big long contract. It was just like a single page, and it was actually bulleted in a really simplified way. I guess that probably speaks to the agency. Hobson's is just a great place. I guess they do business well.
Tim, you probably differ a little bit in how you approach your arrangement. How did you manage the legal side of things? Was it something that your narrator already had a set of terms, or because you actually mentioned royalty share, how did you go about negotiating that?
Yeah, I mean, it was actually quite a lot more informal, I think, because it was a direct working arrangement where RJ's more, I suppose, in our circle, I guess, is the best way to put it. So obviously there are things you need to hammer out, but the key ones being, royalty share versus hourly rate and how those things work out, and also just agreeing how long your book is going to be, because that may sound obvious, but you actually do need to sit down with a spreadsheet and work out, well, if it's so many thousand words, what's your actual narration rate? So different narrators narrate at different speeds, for example. So you'll find that your royalty, normally it won't be huge differences, but that extra hour can make a difference to your budget. You covered it already, Steve, in terms of the distribution. Yeah, what we're effectively creating is something private. So backers will get that as part of their rewards, because it hasn't gone through any of the distribution networks yet to sort of like formalise those arrangements. I think when we get there, that's probably the next sort of legal challenge, is working out how best to distribute. And that probably again will depend on whether it's a royalty share arrangement or whether it's a full hourly rate arrangement, because again that makes it affects how you go through that FET, and have to go through some sort of broker to sort of do that and manage the distribution.
Absolutely.
I haven't actually decided whether I'm going to go with Going exclusive actually, or whether I'm going to go wide, that's still a debate to be had. But at the moment, my head is simply full of, will there be an audiobook? Will it be funded? So that's very much for me a tomorrow problem. And I've set myself October to get the main book out. So I've given myself plenty of time to sort of work through the legalities and the challenges of all of that. To be honest with you, again, that's probably going to be a bit of a partnership discussion between me and RJ about which we think would be the most effective way to get the book out there into the hands of as many people as possible, really. So there'll be a bit of, for me, it's a much more, I don't think of it as my project. I think of it as our project, myself, RJ Bain, and also my artist, Dawn Larder, who's doing poster art, but also book cover art for me for the short story. It's very much a team effort in that respect, although obviously I'm the one that's running it at the end of the day. So yeah, a little bit more slapdash and casual, but that's the indie way sometimes, so I'm not going to apologise for that.
That's such a great segue into our next segment, which is, of course, about planning the actual Kickstarter. There's so much that goes into one of these projects that I'm sitting over here and just being really intimidated by everything that I've got to think about. So for you guys, when you started planning your campaign, where did you start your research, and what resources would you recommend to somebody who is thinking about doing a Kickstarter? And we might throw to MT first.
Most of my research was just like looking up strangers' Kickstarters that I could see had been successful, and looking at what sort of rewards they had offered, because that stuff all stays like up. So I just typed in Kickstarter audiobook and went from there. And then, of course, I had like the brain trust, my friends in my group chat. I was like, what about this? Is this a good reward? And they'd be like, yeah, do that. And we're like, okay. So that was like the extent of my research, was just looking at what other people were doing.
I definitely think that is the number one option. Go look at other Kickstarters that were successful, and go look at ones that weren't successful and see the differences, and like see what people did and what kind of rewards they offered. How long, like every little detail about what happened and what they did, just take note of it. I ran through YouTube videos as well, and, searched on Google and then read a bunch of different blogs on the subject. There are plenty of people who have gone through this process and are willing to share their experiences. And so just go consume as much of that as you can and compare. The comparison aspect, I think, is really important, because one person who does an epic fantasy audiobook might have been successful, and another person who is, you would think is like relatively in the same ballpark as them might have not been successful, and they might have run very similar looking campaigns, but slight differences in how they did it. They might have made all the difference in the world. And so I would, definitely go onto Kickstarter and look at them, but do a lot of comparison as well, I would say.
Yeah, I think what people just said there is really, really good advice. I guess I had the advantage that I did work on the Anatomy of Fear Kickstarter in a sort of backroom capacity, so I wasn't running the project. That was H.L. Tinsley, but I was very much in there in support, and I was involved in reward fulfillment and helping with some of the project updates and communication with backers and things like that. So I knew how it worked, and I was also involved in the Advent of Winter Kickstarter that just concluded in December, which again was a short story anthology physical product, but again, seeing the sort of thing that gets people interested, the marketing side of things, I think, in understanding that, there's understanding the mechanics of how Kickstarter works, there's understanding the mechanics of how you build your rewards, and there are loads of different ways to do that, and I think all of us have got very different campaigns and how we've structured it. Mine's slightly more complicated than maybe it needs to be, but never mind. And then, I suppose understanding how you get the word out is also really, really important as well. So that those things all combine. So I tried to sort of take all that into account, and all that learning into account in trying to build my own. I think you can be as prepped as you like, and you obviously need to be prepped. You can't just go and think, I'll do this and fire it off on Monday. That won't happen. This you need a lot of time to prepare for these and put these in place. But you also have got to accept the fact that a bit like anything in publishing, there's an element of luck involved as well. So some books get traction. Why do some books sell more than others? And it's exactly the same in the Kickstarter environment as well. Those people on that Kickstarter space, some will look at that and go on one project and not choose another. And sometimes you really can't work out why that would be. So I think you've got to, I think, go in with a healthy dose of realistic expectations on it as well. Not every Kickstarter funds. I think that's a really hard, when you put a lot of time and energy and effort into something like this, that's a really hard stat. But actually, the majority of Kickstarters do not actually fund. So I think, again, I think looking at it in the round, prepare, research, but also be realistic and be prepared for all different outcomes, really. I think all those things are important in the preparation.
I think that's so important to stress because Kickstarter actually publishes statistics which are publicly available for every single category of Kickstarter. And when I looked at the publishing ones, it was something like 60% of publishing Kickstarters never make it. And they also provide some deeper breakdowns, and a staggeringly big proportion of them never even make it past, 50% funding or something like that. So it's just, it is hugely challenging. But since we started talking about reward tiers, let's get into the details of your campaigns. And here's a very quick rundown of Kickstarter terminology for anybody who's unfamiliar with it. Rewards are what backers get in exchange for backing your project. And Kickstarter allows a lot of flexibility in how you structure these, as you can see from all of these wonderful campaigns on the screen. Kickstarter does recommend providing a range of rewards at different price points, and we call these tiers. And you can also set up a menu of other things that aren't part of any tier specifically, but you can add them on as part of a backer's pledge. And then stretch goals are extra perks and bonuses and rewards that get revealed or unlocked if a project hits certain milestones in its funding. So let's start with Tim, because as you said, you have the most complicated structure. I was trying to wrap my head around it. How did you come up with your tiers and your add-ons and your stretch goals? And which ones have you found to be the most popular?
Yeah, that's a good question. So, okay, there are a lot of tiers, but there is a logic behind it. It's important to stress that first of all. So it's not crazy. Basically, what I wanted to give people a range. And I think, again, taking advice from other people that successfully kickstarted, one of the things that they did say to me was, you need to find tiers that will enable people to fund you. And that means probably creating tiers that you're really uncomfortable putting out there because they're really high. So that I had to really I thought £5 must be enough, surely. And it was like, no. You don't understand. You need to give people that range. If someone wants to be a super backer and come in and like save the day and give you £500, you need to give them a tier to make it really easy for them to do that. So effectively, my sort of Kickstarter structured up to about £25–30. It's all basically electronic rewards. So it starts with the mini short stories, then you get the mini short stories and ebook, audiobook combination, and then it moves on to the audiobook for All the Bones itself. So it gives you an entry level if you just want to support it at a small number, and then it gradually builds up. And then what happens is you basically stack. So every tier has what it had before, plus something else. And after about £100, I start going into physical products and signed books and all that kind of thing. So yeah, and I think the most popular one, funny enough, has been the audiobook, because that's what I'm fundraising for. So that has been by far and away the most successful of the tiers. In terms of people going for that, has been that one. Halfway through, which has made it a bit more complicated, I've also then threw in some random tiers, which more to generate interest really as part of that slump. So I think you can build these things and you can leave them as they are, and that's absolutely fine strategy, just market and push. But I wanted to create something a little bit different, so I also then put in some of the other Kickstarters I've been in before. We did a bit of a deal behind the scenes to be able to put those in as part of a bundle package. So if you don't want the audiobook, you can go the other way and get a set of short story anthologies in ebook form, for example. The other thing I also did was I broke away from just the electronic, digital tiers in terms of audiobooks and said, do you want the signed books bundle? And I immediately sold one of those without any of the audiobook accompaniments to it. So sometimes going with physical again, it plays to a very different audience. Even having the digital reward weirdly actually put some people off backing it, but they wanted the physical. So there's I think giving people choice, and that's why there are about 14 different tiers of mine. It's to give people that choice and that range of options. And then say me and RJ kind of sat there and just came up with a load of really random add-ons as well. So you can get RJ to record your flash fiction if you want, for example, or an excerpt from one of your books. You can buy that as an add-on, and he'll do that for you, which is marketing opportunity. Dawn Larder, my artist, we agreed a limited tier where actually if you want to spend £150, she'll do you a book cover, and that's bespoke original art that she'll do. No one's backed that tier, which I find really surprising, because I think that's a really good deal for original art, I've got to say. But again, this is where the marketing side of it comes out. So fundamentally, it's about a logical stack, an increasing reward for increasing donation, but then also a few just on the side that maybe cater for a slightly different audience as well. But yeah, by far the most successful has been £25 to back the audiobook, which is obviously brilliant for people that have done that. Thank you very much.
That's fascinating. Steve, your reward structure appeals to me the most, because I look at that and I'm like, this looks the most doable for me, because I look at Tim with the very well thought out tier structure and the array of options for backers, and I look at MT's one where there's swag and all international shipping, and then I just go, I like Steve's campaign. Steve's looks doable and manageable. Could you talk us through your thought process for coming up with yours?
Like I said, I wanted to keep things simple, and I didn't want to burden myself. I didn't want to make it difficult in any way. I just wanted to be able to fund the project and get the audiobook to people. But, we just talked about go look at Kickstarters and see what they were doing. I'm definitely going to be researching Tim's. If you have 14 different tiers, then you have many different rewards thought out. And I found it kind of difficult to think of rewards that were good, and I definitely agree that coming up with the really expensive tiers, that was difficult, because it was just uncomfortable, and it was like, well, what is really worth that much? And it was my most expensive tier. It was something like, one of the things was you had a virtual coffee date with me, the creator, and we can talk about your book or tabletop role-playing games or anything, whatever, and but then that's work that I need to do, and I got to go talk with people and schedule these things. And it was definitely a lot. I wanted to stay more on the virtual rewards side if I could. I did offer the physical book as one of the rewards as well, because it had already been published when I was doing this. Mine was a pure audiobook Kickstarter campaign. And the most, what I found was the most prominent tier was, I had 5 or 6 tiers, and it was the one that was like right in the middle, $50, where and I think probably the thing that made it the most successful was that it wasn't too much money and you got a good chunk, but it was also where I put a signed copy of the print book. And so, like I said, I had a lot of friends and family and people that already knew me and already wanted to support me that were my backers. And let's be real, get your friends and family involved in your Kickstarter as much as you can. Like it's a huge chunk of the people that will back you. But when they are the ones doing that, you want to give them something that's meaningful. And a signed copy of your book is about as meaningful as you can make that artistic endeavor for that person. And, I also, especially when it was one of my, close family members, I wrote a little note in each one. I tried to personalize it. Luckily, it wasn't hundreds and hundreds of people. So I was able to personalize these signed copies. You're not always going to be able to do that. But if it's only like, and I'm even comfortable throwing a number out there, it might be 80 people, it might be like way too many for someone. But, I wanted to keep it simple so that I could make everything worth it for the people who did, pledge to me.
That makes a lot of sense. Now, Mary, let's talk about your campaign, because I'm really excited, because you seem to be the only one who has done swag. And based on my research, right, which consists of lurking the Kickstarter for Authors Facebook group and just like doom scrolling on, Instagram and what have you, swag seems to be huge. Like it seems to be huge in what you see on all over social media and whenever anybody's chatting about campaigns that are hyped and stuff like that. But I have personally never been into swag as a reader. So I'm sitting here just going, I don't know what I'd do for swag. So how did you come up with your ideas, and would you do swag again?
I would absolutely do swag again. So here's what the really great thing about swag is that I have found is, so for example, I have enamel pins that I had at a couple different tiers, and those are expensive. You have to budget for that. they ate a lot of my funds. But when you order things like enamel pins or even bookmarks, the cost per item goes down the more you order. And it got to the point where I was like, I can like over order on all of these. And then I had Emerald City Comic Con where I just had all the extras with me, and I still have extras. And so I plan on making those available on my website, and those are going to help me fund my my second and third audiobooks. I personally love swag. I don't have like the hugest readership, but I do know that my readers are very enthusiastic. And so I was able to sort of decide based off of that, like what am I going to offer? And like I said, I had the pins, and at my lowest, it was like $5. I had a handwritten note, which Stephen was talking about, like handwriting notes inside the books, but I'm like, if you're giving me $5 or more, you're getting a note. I've done wedding thank you cards before, I can do this. But then I also had like a bookmark, which, like, little tip, the upcharge on having them put a ribbon on is insane. Just get a hole punch and some cheap ribbon and some friends and do it yourself. It was like an extra $50. And I was like, no, I could do that for $3. So thank you to my friends who let me use them for physical labor, meaning tying ribbons and cutting ribbons. And then I also have like a couple like animal characters in my books. So one of my, I would think it's like my $50 tier. This was maybe like a little ambitious, but it worked out. I had the Pets of New Delos, and that's just like the name of the city. And so I have them right here with me. So there's a hamster, and then there's a cat, and there's a betta fish.
Oh,
and
that's so cute.
At the $50 tier, you get all three. And so at Comic-Con, I didn't have the hamster or the fish yet. I actually just got those in. So these are going to go out to, I finally get to do like fulfillment. But I did have the cat. And if there's one thing you should know about people who attend to Comic-Con is they do not care what is in your book. But if they see a cat pin, they are going to want the cat pin. And they'll be like, oh, well, that's my character Tonka. And they're like, I want it. And I'm like, okay. And then at a slightly higher tier, I had my girl Samantha. That's my main character. You can see her behind me. And what's also nice, I have been, since publishing the first book, I have been working really hard on getting better at doing art myself. So I don't have to spend a ton of money on commissioning art. I commissioned this one. It's beautiful. Go follow Gigi Draws. But all of these like little pins, my bookmark, like this is all my art. So I was able to save money doing that. And then finally, like my favorite swag, this one was very, very purposely chosen, is a candle. And it's called Fleming's Bookshelf. And Fleming is the history teacher in my books. And a lot of my readers, even though it's YA, a lot of my readers are like in their 30s. And everyone agrees that Fleming is very hot. And I never describe him that way, but he's an anxious single man in charge of keeping children alive. And so people have decided he is a very, very hot, eligible bachelor. And I knew if I made a candle and put his name and face on it, I would upsell people. And it worked. I had one person who even like messaged me afterwards. She's like, like your Kickstarter ended yesterday and I forgot, like, can I PayPal you? And I was like, yes. Like, and she said specifically it's because of the candle. And so that was kind of the swag, and just kind of knowing what my readers like. And even though there's not a ton of them, there's enough of them who are enthusiastic enough to want these items.
That is amazing. That is a level of knowing your audience that I do not currently have. The other thing I was really curious about, you all picked 30 days for your campaign. Why 30 and not 16, 40? I mean, 45 just sounds too long based on what you've all said about how long 30 days feels, but why 30 and not like something shorter?
Well, I'll kick off with that one. Every day on a Kickstarter campaign is 7 years of your real life. So you can't, I couldn't take the stress of the maximum, but you also need to give people enough chance for the word to get out. 30 days just seems the accepted norm. It's what we ran for both Advent of Winter and also Anatomy of Fear. So it just felt like it gives people enough time to know about it and back it and find out about it. But also, like in my case, enough time to react if things perhaps aren't moving quite the way you want as well. So I was able to introduce those tiers. I had time to do that. which I wouldn't have done if I was like running a 7-day campaign or something like that. So quite why it works that way, I don't know whether there's an actual answer to that, but maybe just, me banging on about my Kickstarter for 45 days is probably too, I think 30 days is too long, but 45 days, whatever, definitely it's too long. So there's also like an audience fatigue thing that I think that comes into it a bit as well.
I know that when I set up my Kickstarter, also Kickstarter like gave me a little notification that said, hey, just so you know, according to our numbers, you're more likely to fully fund if you do 30 days or less.
Oh,
and so I was like, okay. And that is why I chose it.
What about you, Steve?
I don't have any evidence to suggest that more than 30 days would be worse in the long run. I definitely think that doing it for like 7 days or something like that, that's not enough time, because, there are some people that don't even like log on to social media for like 4, 5, 6 days in a row or something like that. So, and when they do, they see it and they're like, oh, that's a great idea. I'm definitely going to back that. And then they forget about it for a week or whatever. So 30 days is a nice round number. You can fit it inside of 1 month, and then you can kind of like just call that month your Kickstarter month, and you can make it part of your marketing strategy or what have you. You can there's a lot of things that we emphasize over the course of just one single month. And so 30 days fits in that so neatly that I think that it's probably why it's the most successful one. And yeah, Kickstarter recommended it to me too, and I was like, yeah, that does sound good. And Tim's right. 30 days itself, it's taxing on the body already. So yeah.
That makes a whole lot of sense. Now, my favorite part as a former accountant, the numbers. I'm in the very, very early stages of researching costs. And again, saying this as a former accountant, it is absolutely doing my head in, trying to work out the margins on all of the items and all the tiers and everything. And Kickstarter, as we've already talked about, it always makes the total funds raised kind of like the big headline number, but that's not really what you end up pocketing. So the assumptions I've been working off of is you take 10% off the top for Kickstarter's 5% cut, and then another 5% for the payment processing on credit cards and things like that. Allow another 5% or so for people who pull out, or they get errors on their credit cards and the pledge just doesn't go through for whatever reason. Then in Australia, my marginal tax rate is 30% for my marginal tax rate. And then you've got to take off all those fulfillment costs of like printing and shipping and all that stuff. And once I kind of run through that and I break it down, I'm like, there's not much left over. Like, what have I got left over to actually fund the audiobook? So, Steve, if you wouldn't mind kicking us off with this one, how accurate are those assumptions that I've been talking about? And if you're comfortable sharing, like, did you end up with enough to cover your audiobook? Did you have to actually tip in some extra at the end? And what would you do differently next time with the funding and the budgeting?
First thing is that I'll say is that taxes are going to vary based on where you're located, right? So for me, being based in the U.S., I am, as an indie author, I'm basically an independent contractor. And so my taxes based off of me being an author, they're going to get deducted over the course of the year based on what I made through the year. So it seems like it's a little bit different with just Kickstarter specifically, maybe where you're at. So I didn't have to worry so much about taxes being a big chunk of what I was bringing in. And I wouldn't say that I profited. I made enough to fund the campaign, and then the campaign the audiobook went through. So in the short run, I got like just enough, and like I said, I wouldn't have made it without my mom. She contributed plenty, but over the long run, I would say that it has been profitable, just because I didn't need to do a profit share with anything. I didn't have to go through an agency that is going to take royalties or anything like that. And so your 10% to Kickstarter, I would say is definitely pretty good, or it's kind of basically on the money. And the other thing you said, for dropped pledges and stuff like that, I didn't ever experience any money coming in and then being taken back. Probably because, like I said, I didn't have a lot of strangers that contributed to my campaign. But this is another reason that I wanted to stay mostly with virtual rewards, because there's not a lot of cost associated with shipping those out to people. And I do think I'm going to expand that quite a bit when I do another Kickstarter. Because I'm going to do another one or some sort of crowdfunding project for book 2. But the concept of swag was always very interesting to me, and I would like to get into that more later. But for this first one, I was like, I just want to make sure that everything happens. I just want to make sure that I can fulfill everything, because I didn't use a fulfillment service. I shipped everything out myself. And so I was like, even if it's too little, even if people think, well, you're not offering enough rewards, I wanted to make certain that I could be able to fulfill everything and I could handle all of the rewards getting shipped out. So, which is why, I stayed virtual, so that I could, an email is super easy to send with attachments, and it costs very little effort and money. And that was the main thing about that.
That makes a lot of sense. MT, could you talk about all the complicated stuff that goes into costing the swag and also international shipping? I mean, that is the killer for me, trying to figure out international shipping and where you charge for it and what do you do with it, and oh god.
So what's nice is Kickstarter makes it pretty straightforward. Like, you can set up, like, this is domestic shipping to, like, other people in the US for me, because I live here. And then I get a set, like, because you can tell it no, like, people can't order internationally. And I selected yes because I do have, like, readers in Canada, and I have at least one in England who I knew was going to want all the rewards. So I was like, okay, like, I was able to go to USPS website, kind of put in, like, what I think these things are going to weigh, and then I figured I would underestimate it and just eat the costs, because I'm okay doing that if I'm getting $5,000. And what is nice is when you set the shipping costs, and so, for example, at my $200 tier, it was like $50 to ship internationally. And that $50 goes towards the goal, which I actually kind of appreciated. As you start to worry about, like, am I going to reach the goal? But then all those shipping costs are like, yeah. As for budgeting for rewards, I would recommend not choosing 4 different enamel pins. I love them to death. I'm glad I have them. I'm glad it worked out. Maybe not the best idea. They were expensive. They were at least $200 per pin. And I did get like 50 of each, which, is exciting because, like I said, I have leftovers. But just like doing that research up front and like being okay with like, okay, it's going to cost me almost a fifth of my budget just for the rewards. But again, I was trying to get money from people who were already readers, and I was like, this is what they're going to like. They don't necessarily want an audiobook. So that's kind of like the give and take there. And then I actually ended up, the candles I had to learn how to do myself because I was like, I'm going to do candles. And then I did not do enough research up front. And I was like, oh, custom candles are expensive. And so then I was like, I'm going to get on YouTube and I'm going to learn how to make candles.
Oh, you made your own candles.
I did.
Oh my goodness.
I actually had so much fun. I ended up making several different kinds and selling those at Comic-Con too. So like obviously the Fleming's bookshelf, it's like exclusive to the Kickstarter, but I made one that smells like froyo because there's a joke about froyo, and it was so much cheaper to have a friend over and just have a candle making day, which worried my husband a little bit because he was gone that day and he came in and he's like, it is 80 degrees in here. And I can't breathe. And we were both sitting there sweating in the kitchen like, we're fine. This is totally okay. And then like about 15 minutes later, the headache kind of set in and I was like, oh, I am not fine. So like, if you make your own candles, ventilation is key. But it ended up working out.
This is Tim's Kickstarter right now, and it is gorgeous. So So Tim, you've actually gone the whole hog with your campaign page. You've got not only the video trailer, but you've got all of these wonderful sections where you're pitching directly to potential backers of why they should back this project, all these beautiful graphics, the character profiles, all of these lovely featured rewards. Can you talk us a little bit through, like, how different or similar have you found pitching a Kickstarter versus how you would normally just pitch a potential reader your books?
Yeah, that's a really good question, because they're totally different markets, I've discovered. So I've never marketed something so hard as this Kickstarter campaign. I haven't seen any of that translate, though, into book sales or pages read on Kindle Unlimited or anything like that. So it feels like the reader market, I suppose, for want of a better phrase, the ordinary reader market is kind of a different group to the, I suppose, the more hardcore fans that you're trying to reach through the Kickstarter market. So yeah, I think a lot of this is about making the page vibrant and I suppose current as well. So actually, what started out, that story was half the length it now is, because one of the things I did sort of discover quite early on is that a lot of backers, and particularly that kind of brigade that hang out in the world of Kickstarter exclusively, they like to see a page that changes and updates, which is something I hadn't fully appreciated until I started to actually run my own and think, gosh, actually it's quite hard to keep updating it and keep the story coherent, really.
So they actually come back and refresh this every day just to see what you've posted, and exactly. So you've actually got people coming into this update section and just like checking out what's happening and ticking along.
Yeah, and that takes a bit of thought, because the updates is one section, which is you're posting to your backers, but also the public ones people can access. But then the core message I have to put into the actual story itself. So I spend quite a lot of time maintaining that page and developing it just to highlight things like, for example, when the new reward tiers came in, I put that front and center at the top of the campaign, which again feels counterintuitive, because you think, well, surely you should put your own product at the top of that, but actually people want you to sort of be shouting about your successes, celebrating where you've got to and what's new. So the people that the returners are going to be looking at what's new, and that needs to therefore be at the top of the page. So again, some of my author instincts and my marketing instincts needed to sort of be a bit realigned, really.
So did you find that it's more about not necessarily just the product that you're pitching of the audiobook, but really it's more about, this is the story of Tim, and this is, Tim's journey on the Kickstarter project, and you're all coming with Tim on this journey to get this thing happen?
I think that's exactly right. This is not, you're not just simply selling something in a shop. You are selling yourself, you're selling the journey. You want your backers to feel like they are part of something bigger, which of course they are, because they're making something happen that wouldn't happen without them. So yeah, you'll find things like other podcasts I've done, I've dropped some of those actually onto the page and into the updates as well. So again, if people want to sort of do a bit more deep dive into what we're talking about or why I'm doing what I'm doing, there's that option. I suppose really just throwing everything at it, really. How successful it is, of course, you don't know. This is what's maddening about it. You don't know what's working. So obviously, your family support and your friends and things, they make a big chunk, don't they? But what makes someone become a backer who's a stranger, I think, is a bit more magical, really. And I think this is one of the reasons why I'm doing quite a few different things, because video will work for some people. For other people, it's like, actually, when you hit a certain milestone, I get a reward anyway, whether the project backs or not. There's a bit more mercenary side of it, really. So it's trying to think about all those things in the round.
That's such a great segue to the next section that I'd love to talk about, which is how, what do you do in terms of all that marketing? So we might just skip over the setup and pre-launch and go into that marketing, because I'm sure many people who are watching have found, as I have discovered to my own regret, that you think writing and publishing the book is like the hardest thing ever. And then you hit publish and you're just like, oh crap, how do I actually get people to read this thing? And like, I did the thing that you're not supposed to do, which is like, I just threw it up on Amazon and then I was like, great, book's out, please buy it. And of course nobody did, because they were just like, who are you? And like, why would I buy your book? And so I have personally found marketing and promotion and all that stuff to be the hardest thing to get my head around, and that's just on an ongoing daily basis where I just struggle to market my book. But for a Kickstarter campaign where you're on non-stop for 30 days, and not just the 30 days that you're live, but in the whole lead up to it and in the afterwards, how are you guys handling this? How did you guys handle this? Because it's just probably the most intimidating thing, because you know the numbers and stuff, you can kind of work all that out in advance and you can plan contingencies, but the marketing, my goodness. MT, maybe you kick us off with this one first.
Yeah, so I really like TikTok. I'm really big into it. So I did a lot of marketing there because it's free, and then just like kind of the same with other social media. I mean, it is a lot like marketing the book, just being like, hey, this is a thing. I ran into 2 issues. One was I did my campaign during the holidays. Don't do that, because everyone's buying Christmas presents. And I was aware of this. And it was just like, it's just how the timing worked out, unfortunately for me, where I was like, well, this is what I'm doing. And I knew it was gonna be rough going in, and it was definitely rough. And then the other really big thing was like something that you just like can't plan for, but a friend who's like really big member of the community here had a GoFundMe going on because he needed a new heart. And it felt really, really tacky posting, hey, give me money for my audiobook, when someone who's so wonderful and so loved is going through something where he needs money donations. And so that was like a thing I had to like sort of wrestle with, and it's someone my husband's closer with than I am, and so we talked about it, and he's like, okay, like we're not going to post about it. We're not going to post about the Kickstarter for a couple weeks because 1, it's Christmas. No one's going to be donating anyway. 2, it's kind of like that weird middle part of a Kickstarter where no one's donating. And then after the new year, I had a week, and I was like, let's go. Our friend, he's doing amazing, by the way. And he got so many donations, and I was like, I feel good now. So most of my marketing was 1, the first couple days, and then that final week. And I actually have a really good friend, I think we all know him, Zach Argyle, who had a very successful Kickstarter last year, and he had that whole mailing list. And in that final 24-hour push for me, Zach, without me asking, he emailed out an update to his Kickstarter backers, which again was a lot of people, and he said, hey, my friend is doing a Kickstarter, it's ending soon, go support it. And I did get a good push from that. So being an active member of the indie community has its benefits, because when one of us succeeds, we all succeed. And so I really appreciated that from Zach.
That's amazing. Steve, what did you do in terms of your marketing and promotion for your Kickstarter? Like, did you have a strategy going in? How much of it did you pre-plan? How big of an audience? And because you mentioned that you were pretty confident going in that you would have the audience and platform to support your goals. So how did all of that translate from, you know, I think I've got enough of a following to, all right, people, pull your wallets out and help me make this happen?
I thought that it was a little bit easier to pitch a Kickstarter than just my book itself, because when you have the book, it's a product, and I use the analogy of you're standing on the street and you're like a street hawker, and somebody walks by and you're like, hey, do you want to buy a book? And you hold the book up to them, and yeah, they may say yes or they may say no. But if you start to talk about, yeah, it was really hard, and this is my lifelong dream, and I've been through all of this stuff, you're just going to drive them away. No one cares about that. No one wants to hear about that. But when you're talking about Kickstarter, and when you are pitching a Kickstarter, people want to hear the story. Like Tim said, people want to be magicked. They want to hear the story. They want to feel an emotional connection. There's been plenty of research, marketing research done on purchasing habits, and people make purchases more often based on emotion than they do on logic. And so when you are pitching your Kickstarter, it's really important to I think it's really important to have a video that is well presented and well edited. And when you can sell people on the journey, that they are going to be a part of, they're way more likely to think to themselves, man, that's really cool and I want to be a part of it. And it's just gravy on top if they're an actual reader who wants to flip through the book and read the book or listen to the book, whatever it is. Everyone gets products every single day. Like we are a society that is just chock full of various different products. And so give them a good product, absolutely, but give them a really good story and journey to be a part of. And however you can convey that, is how you need to go about it. And so for me, I really laid into the, I am an enormous fan of Stephen Pacey, and I just name dropped him as much as I could. That was one of the main pillars of my marketing strategy. And I was like, I'm a huge fan. And to be able to I always thought it was going to be this weird pipe dream or something to have my own audiobook narrated by my favorite narrator, this, incredibly talented theatrical person. But it's not a pipe dream. It's actually right here in front of me. And so, for only like $5, $10, you can help be a part of that. And so that was definitely the main thing, was name dropping him. I remember I made a post on Twitter that was I just made a video that was some environmental terrain shot or something like that, but it was a little snippet of Stephen Pacey's voice in one of my lines, and it's that kind of that teaser, that magical feeling that Tim was talking about. Definitely have a good video. I think that's really important, but also the page itself should be well presented, because it makes sense that people want it to be updated. That wasn't something that I really did, so note taken. And just sell the story, sell the journey, and be genuine about it, because that's what's going to hook most people.
Now, Tim, you have mentioned going on like a lot of podcasts and things like that, and I've just been quietly watching your publicity tour on the sidelines, and it's been quite impressive. How did you manage to line all that up, and how much lead time did you need to pull off some of the things that you've been able to do?
Yeah, I mean, it does. I think, first of all, I agree with everything people have already said, and all those things are really, really great advice. You've got to really know your market and got to know who you're pitching to, and telling that story is really, and the timing of when to tell that story, when not to, is really, really important. So I spent probably about a month building the thing, so I knew what I was actually trying to pitch to bloggers and podcasters and things like that, and then again just use my contacts I've already made through releasing books and writing over the years to sort of say, would you be happy to feature in it? Pretty much everyone said yes, so that was really easy. It was a big admin task to, like, on an Excel spreadsheet to list who I was talking to and where we got to in that discussion, but a couple of exceptional people were busy, but most people were really happy to have me on. And then from that it sometimes builds. So, like, we had the conversation. Now we're having this conversation partly because I've been out there talking to other people about it as well. It did take some organising and obviously timing as well. So I also had to think about whether they're live or whether they're pre-recorded was the other thing, because obviously at the beginning it's all pre-recorded, trying to sell the initial story, but now you're having to listen to my story of 61% funded Bleeding Heart, Tim Hardie. But we can do that because it's live, so I can be reactive to what's actually happening in that campaign and talk about things I've changed that I couldn't do if it was all pre-recorded stuff from before. So that was the broad plan, get them all stacked up. So probably a month of building, and then the next month was really just building the publicity campaign that went alongside it with all sorts of things like written interviews and emails, mail shots. That other thing, get your friends to help you spread the word, because it's very boring if it's just me all the time. So if other people are sharing your story, that again is very, very powerful actually. So I've been featured on lots of people's mailing lists, and some people have been absolutely blown away with the support I've had from some people when I was struggling to get through creating fresh marketing material and videos and graphics. Somebody actually sent me some, which I didn't ask for. They just appeared as if I knew it was, but it appeared as if by magic. So yeah, people would get behind that thing, and then they start to support you in their own way as well, which is amazing. But now it's more chaos reacting and just coming up with different ideas and things at this stage, really.
Oh my goodness, that's just so inspiring that you had all these people pitch in, especially with like the graphics just magically showing up. That is
amazing.
Fantastic, and a really great case in point of what the indie community is capable of, I think. Let's move on and talk a little bit about logistics and fulfillment, because the digital stuff is easy. The physical stuff is what is absolutely doing my head in. We might go to Steve first and then go to MT for this one. So Steve, when you did your paperback books, how did you handle them? Did you do them sort of as a print on demand, like a big box of author copies? How did you do all the shipping? Because you did domestic shipping only within the US, is that right?
Yes. And I regret that, for the record. I wish that I wish I would have included other countries, because I just didn't think it through. And I talk about the big name that Stephen Pacey is. He's an even bigger name across the pond in the UK. So like, if I would have included at least them in the shipping, then I probably could have done a little bit better. I should have bit the bullet and paid more for the shipping in order to offer more to more people, because I know that is a thing that some people say, is that like, well, swag is great and virtual things are great, but I really do want the physical book at the end of the day. Another thing that I learned in my survey at the end was that a lot of people would have liked a hardback to have been offered. And, I mentioned earlier that I was just going to stay away from that to make sure I could do everything else, but people apparently want it. And so as far as a reward tier goes, it probably would have served me well to include that and to include other countries in the shipping. I did it because it was the cheaper option, and I thought to myself, most of my rewards are virtual, so I can still give the majority of rewards to anyone, anywhere. I just will only ship to the United States. But for those that I did ship out, I just handled it myself. Yeah, I got all the books, author copies, and had them here in my home, and then I went and shipped them out myself. And luckily, UPS offers a special rate to small businesses shipping out for business purposes, and so it wasn't terribly expensive. But that was just part of the cost that I built into the overall pledge goal that I was trying to reach. I priced it right at the cost of paying for everything and then shipping things out. And so that, the amount of money that I got, it was to pay for everything to a T, and shipping was already built into the original pledge amount.
That makes a lot of sense. I am super jealous, by the way, of the fact that the US has media mail. Australia does not have anything like that. So every single time I send a book, I'm sending it as a package. And the last time I shipped something to Canada, I think it cost me like $52 to ship it via Australian Post, which is just absolute killer. So I am really curious as to how Mary handled international shipping, because I'm just like, getting anything to and from Australia, it just sucks.
Yeah. No, so I'm only just starting the fulfillment stage. Like I said, I just got like my final pins in. And luckily, there's not a ton of international packages I will be sending. There's a couple to Canada, and like it's nothing huge. Because even like my $50 tier, like just for like reference, it's a card, 3 pins, and this. And like they've already got the audiobook. And like that's like easy to ship. I'm not like super worried about the like small handful of Canadians that I have to fulfill to. I do have that one in England that I know is going to be a wallet buster, but that is okay, because again, they did pay for most of the shipping. And then I think it'll be pretty straightforward, because like I said, my swag's not super huge. And then I do have, at one of my tiers, I actually had like a special hardback edition that's annotated. And so that one is not going to ship with these because it's taking a little bit longer. and that's like, you know, 7 whole people waiting for it. So, and most of them know me, so none of them are sitting there going, "Where's my book, Mary?" And all but one of them are US, so that'll be media mail. So yeah, I'm not too worried about it. I think it'll all work out.
That definitely helps to know that when you're in the fulfillment stage. Tim, with your 14 tiers, how are you managing fulfillment? Are you going to be using some sort of like backer kit pledge manager thing? Are you going to be doing like a small offset print run of your books? Or are you just going to be dropship? Like how is all that going to work?
It's all by me. Again, I was fairly confident because I basically helped fulfill the Anatomy of Fear. So, and I also ran the finances behind the scenes of the Anatomy of Fear as well. So I knew what things cost from doing that. So it was just taking a bit of a view. What was it likely to cost to send, you know, that around the world as my sort of base shipping? And I was, you know, basically worked out what it would be for the UK. It's obviously cheaper because that's where I live. But pretty much for everywhere else, it's either Europe's £10 or the rest of the world is kind of 15. And that sort of was how the Anatomy of Fear experience worked out. So that wouldn't work if I'm sending like a stack of 4 books, like a signed set. But again, I took a view that, well, I'll take a small hit on the shipping for some of those things on the basis of keeping it simple for people and also just not upping the shipping till it becomes prohibitively expensive, really. But most of it is digital, part because I knew I was going to be fulfilling it. It's about just being organised as well. It's the other thing. Have a spreadsheet is my strong advice for this. Work out who you're fulfilling, what they're entitled to. You know, remember what your tiers mean, because that can go. It makes a lot of sense when you're setting up. But like you say, a few months maybe sort of down the line, it's like, oh gosh, what is that person entitled to? So it's a lot of it is just, you know, it's the admin. And if you do the admin right, I think fulfillment then becomes fairly straightforward. You can do a lot of that actually through Kickstarter messages directly. So you can email people through Kickstarter, for example. So for fulfilling things like the audiobook, that's the route I'll use. And then, yeah, it's just a case of, you know, buying some packaging materials, some tape, and getting stuff sent off around the world, really. So I think I'm not too worried about it, having been through it before.
You're giving me a lot more confidence now, because the logistics is my main weakness, I would say. I cannot cope with all of the different combinations. And so hearing you say that is very, very reassuring. Let's move on to just a general kind of high level wrap up. What, if anything, would you do differently about this entire process? Anything from getting the audiobook produced through to how you run your Kickstarter. If you're going to run another campaign for another audiobook, what would you do differently? And we might start with Mary.
Oh, I would not run the Kickstarter during the holidays. That was so dumb. Yeah, I think that wraps up. I would probably not do 4 enamel pins. I love them. I'm so glad I have them, but that was a risk that I'm lucky worked out.
Dave?
I do plan to run another Kickstarter for my second book in the Bards and Dragons saga, and I am going to probably offer a hardcover as one of the rewards, just because that was something that people said that they would have liked, and I will probably look at offering some sort of art reward. Maybe not physical swag like a poster or anything like that, but maybe just artwork that could be sent virtually to someone, something like that. I found that people really like artwork. You know, they really like to see the characters drawn out and actually visible to them. I will include shipping to other countries besides the US, for sure.
Tim, what about you? I know you're still in the middle of your campaign and your process, but based on your experience so far, what would you do differently?
Yeah, I suppose it's hindsight would be a really good thing. In a couple of weeks' time, and I'll look back on this and wonder, you know, whether I did the right thing or not. Really, it's. I think the one thing I have learned that doesn't work, and you know, probably for the reason we talked about earlier on this podcast, is I did do some experimentation with paid advertising. Did it at the beginning of the campaign, and also did it at the end. Did it at the beginning just using Facebook's automated sort of dashboard and just fired it out just for awareness. And I did it again much more targeted at the end, and actually killed that second advert because it wasn't working. People were clicking on it, but no one was nothing was translating through to people actually backing. And I think that's down to that you said, Steve, about logic versus the sort of emotional connection of why you back a particular product. And so what I was doing was raising awareness, but it wasn't enough of an emotional pull for people to then commit to backing a project from somebody they'd never heard of before, I'm guessing. So for me, I don't think I'd bother with paid adverts again. I think it's more about telling the story and focusing on that, I think, is the key takeaway.
That's fascinating. That's awesome. All right, we do have a few questions that have popped up in the little poll tool thing. I think we've covered most of these, but the one part I think that segues neatly into our final thoughts and wrap up is this question about what do you think, knowing what you know now, what do you think goes into giving your Kickstarter the best chance at success?
Yeah, what I said earlier about creating this story about you and your journey in being an indie author, because we're all on this on our own. We don't have major publishing houses behind us. We don't have marketing agencies helping us out. And a lot of what we're doing, we're figuring out on the go. And, and it's tough. And that's why we're all here right now, is we're sharing our experiences for other people who are just going to then go do it and find out their own stuff as they go. And so it really is about letting people into the journey of you following your dreams, because I have to believe that's why we're all indie authors, is because we love doing what we're doing and writing and telling these stories. It's not for the money, and so yeah, like, let people in and convert people into believers about the concept of following your dreams, because we're here, we're living it, we're crowdfunding to be able to live it, and it's tough, but it's also, in the long run, it's worth it.
Tim, what are your thoughts? What are your final words of advice to anybody thinking about embarking on a Kickstarter campaign?
Yeah, well, Steve's nailed that a bit. So, but I think, yeah, it is about that story. It is about that emotional connection, ultimately, being prepared. And I think I will go back in terms of making it successful. If you're looking for, reacting and fresh ideas, I mentioned support network a bit earlier on this call. I think that's really, really important as well. So I think if all the ideas are coming from you, that's quite a challenge. So, surround yourself with creative people that want you to succeed, because that goes a long way to actually helping you come up with good ideas to help you get over the line as well. And yeah, I think I will just finish. I think you need to be prepared for both outcomes as well. Writing is always, by its definition, it's a risky endeavor, isn't it? We definitely don't do it for the money. We do it because we want to create new art and do creative things. And some things will work and some things won't work. You need, I suppose, to go into the mindset, being prepared to be able to manage to live with both outcomes. It's the same as releasing a book, getting a good review or a bad review. It's the same book, different reactions, and it's exactly the same when it comes to things like crowdfunding. Your campaign will get different reactions from different people. It's the same campaign. It's about finding the ones you really want to connect with.
Absolutely. Mary, what are your thoughts? What are your final words of advice?
Yeah, definitely. Sorry, my husband just started calling me. Being kind to yourself, because when you're in the thick of it, when you're not getting that funding that you thought you would be getting, it's really easy to get in your feelings and feeling inadequate and feeling embarrassed, because it is a very public thing that you're doing, and everyone can see how much money you're making and how many people are supporting you, and it can be very hard to deal with the feelings of shame when you want to look successful. So sorry, just being kind to yourself. I think you guys wrapped it up nicely.
Excellent. Thank you so much. All right, we might close here because we're almost up on the 2 hours. So a big, big, big thank you to Tim, to Mary, to Steve for joining this live Q&A. And here is one final chance to pitch anybody who is watching on your books. And we might start with you, Steve. Where can people find your books and who should read them?
On this little known place called Amazon and Audible, you can find The Way of Renegades. And I would say, if you are the exact person is a nerdy military veteran. So if you know anybody like that, or you think that you are yourself one of those, you like military stuff, you like fantasy, then you will like this.
Excellent. Tim, who should read your books and where can they find them?
So I'm also exclusive to Amazon at the moment, so that's where you can go to find my work. People like it. I think people, if you like writers like Robin Hobb, John Gwynne, I think a nod to a Joe Abercrombie as well, and probably George R.R. Martin, that those are all sort of touchstone influences for me. I think they come through in the writing. So, you know, Brotherhood Eagle, it's Viking inspired sort of action and adventure, but then there's a whole intrigue side of it as well. So if you like a situation where you're not quite sure who's on which side and what their motivations are, and you like character-driven fantasy and stories like that, then I think the Brotherhood of the Eagle is going to be right up your street.
Excellent. And Mary, where can people find your books and who should read them?
They are on Amazon, anywhere books are sold, actually. And on my website, if you want them signed, I do international shipping. And they are ideal for anyone who's ever been told that they're inadequate for a job that they really want to do. I know that they're YA, but a lot of my readers are older.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Please do, everybody, check out the links in the description. You will be able to find all the books there. And finally, make sure to check out Tim's Kickstarter. There's just 4 days left in the campaign and a lot of cool rewards on offer, as we've discussed. And if you are an author looking for your next book cover or trying to get a book trailer together, make sure you check out those special add-ons that Tim's got for a book cover package deal from his cover artist, as well as the flash fiction add-on from his narrator. That honestly is what really excites me, because can you imagine like just having a gorgeous book trailer that you can post everywhere on social media with like a professional narrator reading out your blurb? Like, that just sounds awesome to me. Anyway, this has been such a useful session for me personally. I hope anybody who's watching will agree with this. There's just been so much insight shared by all of you. So thank you once again for coming onto my channel. And if you're watching this on replay and you've got questions, please drop them in the comment section and we will do our best to get you some answers. There was so much to cover that we really didn't get into a lot of the nitty-gritty of the numbers. And if that's something you're interested in, then I do have a more detailed analysis video on analyzing Brandon Sanderson's Kickstarter and all his numbers. So go check that out. I will put that up here for you to watch. And thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys again in the next video. Bye!
Right, thanks very much.